Another fine hunt, eh? Yeah. Okay, let's not waste time.
Shei-Wu, a dangerous cephalopod that acts like an assassin for the ruins of Wyveria, and it does not care what its prey is, as long as it gets its meal, hunting both guardians and any creature that comes within its territory. Today we will be taking a look at just some of the many things that Shei-Wu is capable of, and how it relates to its real-life cephalopod counterparts in some ways. We'll be starting off with how it is able to contort its body to unbelievably small corridors and holes. Even with its head, which looks like a completely hardened material, it's able to slip through with ease through the cracks within the ruins of Wyveria. A real octopus, as long as its beak can fit through a location, it can usually end up squeezing through even the smallest of places. Though, as we'll see later on, it doesn't seem to really have a beak like a traditional cephalopod might. Despite its flexibility, its weapons are not ones that are soft in any manner. It's able to produce these weapons through this golden mucus that its body makes, that when it comes into contact with the air, quickly hardens. This glowing fluid can be seen more prominently in Shei-Wu's head when it's exhausted, seemingly leaking out everywhere. So it could be possible that its head is where these liquids are produced and then redistributed across the body. As you look closer at them, they harden to this very beautiful golden hue and end up becoming a very versatile weapon, from spears to bladed weapons, even very blunt weapons that it can use to, as you imagine, knock out monsters and the hunter alike. It also has a rather unique form where it creates these hooks, but only when you are either mounting it or when it is enraged, that it uses to quickly traverse the ground or disrupt the player's location by pulling them around. And back on the topic of its underside, you can see it doesn't really have a beak, but it sure has plenty of teeth to go around. In a normal cephalopod, all these spikes are usually where you would find various suckers that they would use to help traverse while underwater against the very slippery surfaces. But given that Shei-Wu is on ground, it seems that spikes are a much better traversal method instead. Even saying this though, certain species of squid do have very spiky, rigid suckers at times, likely to most often stop prey from running away easier, as that would give them some method of gripping. And this is probably true for Shei-Wu as well. Underneath, we get all these brilliant blues and cyans that shine out over its very contrasting black body above. And in some cases, usually when it's angrier, we tend to see it turn its body inside out and use its body as a battering ram, doing this so fast that it even gets a little tired and dizzy immediately after doing so. As we take a look at its various limbs, you can see that the spikes all point inward at each other. That's because when it does wrap its body around to strike, it unfolds its legs and expands to reveal even more spikes everywhere, likely giving them a better opportunity to grip onto their prey even worse than it already did. When we are closer observing the underside of Shei-Wu, we also get a very prominent look at its skin cells and just how large they are. The amount of detail they go to do this is crazy for how often the player won't even get to get a very close look at these, as it's not very often that you end up finishing it off in its upside down position. If we look at the back of Shaywu, there is a oddly easy to miss body part that I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the mantle of Shaywu or some other organ that Shaywu possesses. As with the previous footage, we did seem to establish that the head on top, where its crown is, seems to be more of a organ for producing its mucus. Maybe this is some sort of leftover evolution trait from a time where it could have possibly lived underwater, or something else entirely. It's really hard to say, since we never really see it use this. With this, it also has two small frontal arms, which it likely uses to help grab onto things better, more accurately. Now, probably one of the most beautiful locations in the game, and a relieving contrast from all the blues, whites, and violets that we find within Wyveria. Here we arrive at the nest of Shaywu, which is littered with eggs everywhere. And we can actually see these hatch. They are called Shayyo. These little cubs are fairly rare and usually need very specific conditions to even see them spawn. Though if you do the story quest for this, you tend to often see them spawn anyway. They have a few different variations in how they visually appear, but the more notable pattern that we see among them is the shape of a skull. I guess you could consider this a fair warning as to what it will grow up into being. In the hunter's notes for this, it says they sustain themselves off the egg sacs after they hatch. But then after this, it is unclear what exactly sustains them. And we never really see them outside of their nest in this very specific location. In some species of octopus, we often see their parent take care of them without moving for several years, and even dying at times immediately after their offspring hatch. But here it's probably safe to say the Shaywu does not share in the parental tactics of its real-life counterparts. With these Shayyo, we also see that New Udra has offspring if you go to the oil well basin during the plenty, and they can be seen in a massive abundance. As to what makes all these cubs float is kind of left on the table, as we never get a clear answer to that. We've seen other floating creatures in Monster Hunter World as well, such as the flying Medusa and the moon slug, but those also never gave us an explanation as to why they were able to float like this. I guess this will just always end up staying a mystery. Now we're going to talk briefly about their weapons on the final step, as just like Lalabrina, they have some fun trivia to them. All of the final steps of Shaywu's weapons are named in reference to assassinations. And now for your favorite parts, me butchering names. The hammer is called Zatsio's Execution, and this is in reference to Lorenzaccio de Medici. The hunting horn is called Keijen's Lament, in reference to Jinkei. The greatsword is called Crinvillo's Dissolution, in reference to Gavrilo Princip. The sword and shield, Cordelay's Revocation, in reference to Charlotte Corday. The switch axe, called Brutus's Abolishment, is pointing towards Marcus Junius Brutus. And one all my Americans probably picked up on is Bookwilf's Punisher, the bow, in reference to John Wilkes Booth. We looked at this briefly before, but I thought I'd take another closer look. When Shaywu becomes enraged, its place where you think its face would be begins to glow this bioluminescent blue, and upon being enraged, becomes very swift and aggressive compared to what it was before. But for the most part, it doesn't get that many moves, outside of access to its new hook weapon. Here we can see it in a few turf wars, but these largely end up ending the same, as Shaywu is the unofficial apex of the Ruins of Wyveria, and seems to almost always win its fights, ending in the same way with Shaywu lurching itself over its victim in an attempt to likely eat it. Overall, this very alien-feeling creature really stands out amongst almost everything else we see in Monster Hunter Wilds, and definitely lands in my favorite among them. Now we're going to take a little detour and look at its gear that we can obtain from it. Upon researching and doing a bit more deeper dive into this, I came to the conclusion that a lot of the armor itself is heavily inspired by royalty and people living in higher stature within various cultures of India. We can see this influence through all the decorations that litter these armors, covered in golds and various gemstones. And with this, probably a little tinge of Middle Eastern influences as well. I love how much this armor incorporates the aesthetics of Shei Wu, with all the various bones and teeth scattered all around. Even the turban on top having the similar silhouettes to the crown that Shei Wu has on the top of its head. This is definitely one of those armors that really leans into the old world style of monster armors, where it does feel like you are using the parts of the monster, and it's not just a separate outfit that's themed around the monster, like we tend to often see with some of the newer world armors. Looking at the weapons as well, we can see the very strong influences from various Indian cultures, with these many curved weapons and shotels and other various decorations that you see on them. It really strikes that right balance of not being too gaudy and still leaning into the monster's aesthetics, such as the Greatsword having the shape of a tentacle arm with all the teeth interlaying each other as if it's splitting open, and the handle shaped like a tendril as well, with all these gemstones lodged into the guard. This is probably one of my favorite hammers as well, because instead of being a hammer, we get a giant axe. And one of the details I want to highlight on the axe is near the handle, where we get a sort of cloth material and is imitating Shei Wu's crown with all the gold mucus that is hardened over it. The shield on the sword and shield also has a surprising amount of details, from the front being decorated in these various gems, almost looking like an eye protruding and watching you, as if it's stalking you just like Shei Wu would from any location. And for the sword, we get this sort of fantastical half-moon crescent shotel thing, which is using one of Shei Wu's very rare weapon choices with the hook. Even on the back of the shield, they go into great detail in making sure that the straps to hold the shield on are themed around the weapon as well, and not just some generic placeholder. The amount of work they put into these weapons cannot be understated, and I think a lot of people should take another closer look at these weapons when they get the chance. You can really tell the care that went into crafting Shei Wu, all the way from how it functions and lives in its habitat, to even its gear that we end up obtaining. Hopefully we end up seeing more of Shei Wu. Considering where Ascendance is taking us, I think that's very likely. And that will do it for another Monster Hunter Wilds Bestiary video. Up here, another video. Down here, another video. Over here, subscribe. Thank you to my members, and thank you for watching. Bye!